I'm Dante, and this is Dante Dakara, and kind of a cold start because I just want to get right into it. There was a school shooting in America today, and what does that have to do with Japan? Well, every time there's a school shooting, my students ask me something about why this happens. And I have to say to them some bullshit answer that doesn't really cover everything, but I have to just make it simplistic enough for them to actually understand it without going into the politics of why it's happening. But what makes this particular shooting especially special is the fact that someone said that Japan doesn't have these problems because they're peaceful and they don't have as many mental health issues and they're homogenous. And then for those of you who saw my Paradise series, you can check it out up there. I think I'll link the one about conservatives because that one fits. That is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. Pardon my French. That was stupid. It's stupid because these are some tropes that I hate. Japan is peaceful. Really? Really? Would you say that to the thousands of women who go or have domestic violence that's unreported? Or would you say that to the people that got acid thrown them at the train station last fall? Or how about the people that were stabbed by the guy that was inspired by the Joker? Or how about 2 decades ago when there was a gas attack within the subway? Peaceful, right? See, this whole idea that Japan is like, oh, everyone's so peaceful, like, I think is really stupid. Let's go into the next thing they said. They said homogeny. Homogeny is the reason. Aside from that being extremely racist, in the sense that like they believe that everyone being one race kind of contributes to peace and harmony. If we look at the shootings that have happened, there is nothing to say that homogeny would have stopped it, so much as to say that unless all black people didn't exist for the grocery store shooting that happened 3 days ago, or excuse me, last week, or to say that the shooter that just shot all those people, he was Hispanic, so if everybody was Hispanic, he wouldn't have shot everyone. Allegedly, he's Hispanic. The news is still coming out about that. However, race, like, really, generally speaking, only has to do with the narrative for which we talk about these things. Like, if it was, and of course I'm going to get killed for this, but if it was a white person that shot a bunch of people, especially if they're like 18, oh, this 18-year-old boy with mental health issues and a lone wolf killed all these people. But if it's a black guy who's 18, or if it was a Hispanic guy who's 18, this 18-year-old disturbed man, this 18-year-old black man, this man who comes from this country, like, it's made to be a xenophobic issue. So this whole homogeny thing is some veiled form of racism or elitism by this idea that one race, one country makes everything peaceful. That is just not true. You will get killed by whoever is around you, race, color, demographic, sexuality, all of that doesn't matter. I'll talk about what matters here in a moment. The last thing this individual said was mental health is an issue in Japan. I thought that was just like the stupidest thing. Literally, you could not be more wrong. We have people committing suicide every day. Like, my biggest fear is my kids committing suicide. We have people who work at black companies. There's a word for people staying inside because they want to avoid the outside world, hikikomori, a kind of mental health issue. We have people who are worked to death. We have a word for that. I think it's karoshi. My Japanese is bad. Death by overwork. That's a kind of mental health issue. We have people going to work every day who want to die. That's a mental health issue. But if we have all those mental health issues, if you say Japan has all these problems, if you say they're so unpeaceful, then why? Why is this happening? Why isn't Japan having more shootings? Well, the answer is quite obvious. Access to guns. Who would have thought by limiting access, by making mandatory training, by making mandatory licensure, by making mandatory counseling, you can prevent stupid people with problems from seeking weapons from, generally speaking, everywhere and deciding to kill people. Who would have thought restrictions would restrict people from shooting people? You know, it's interesting. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, talk about shootings in general. But I come from, you know, this military background, and we have something called the use of force spectrum. And the use of force spectrum is three things. Back when I was in, it was three things. And it was having the opportunity, the capability, and the intent. Without these three things, you could not engage that individual in lethal force. And you're saying, what does that have to do with this? That sounds like a law enforcement thing. Well, it is, but when you think about it, if we don't view someone as a threat unless they have all three, and we implicitly take away two, then that person ceases to be a threat. If we take away the capability for these people to inflict pain and devastation upon children, upon people who are going to their grocery store, about people going to church, about people going to clubs just to have fun, people going to yoga, people going home. If we eliminate the capability, it is proven that people are more peaceful. How many people have died from gun violence in Japan in the last year? 10. How many people have died from gun violence in the last year in America? 30,000. What's the difference? We're both economically elite. We both are developed democracies. We both have a history of war. One country has a deathly fear of terrorism and tyranny. So much so, they're willing to submit their children to terrorism and tyranny. So, I don't give a shit what anybody says about gun rights. Not a single shit. Not even a sliver of a fuck do I care. Not one. There's so many stats. There's so many good examples of how we can stop this thing from happening. There's so many ways that you can see. Look at all the countries in the world. I'm wearing this Japan t-shirt. You can look at Japan and see. But people are too busy talking about Japanese culture, and I'll end it on this. People talk about Japanese culture a lot. It's really interesting. People like to say that Japanese culture is like the best culture in the world. And I love Japan. I love Japanese culture. People talk about how, like, you know, it's in American culture to have guns. It's in American culture to be quote unquote free, like no one else in the world's free. And then I think how easily you can change a culture. Because for hundreds of years, Japan waged war amongst themselves against Korea, against China, for hundreds of years. But in 50, 60, their culture is now considered peaceful. Literally the most famous thing about Japan amongst boys are the samurai. Warriors. And yet the culture is considered peaceful. So when you tell me that American culture is guns, and I say, well, change the culture, and you look at me like I'm stupid, here's a mirror. You're stupid. I'm Dante. This is Dante Dakata. Until next time. Later.